All Blacks depth chart for 2022, folks. How did the All Blacks go in 2022? Bit of a mixed season, I think you would say. We're going to go through the depth by position, which players have been getting all the game time and which players have kind of gone up or down in the pecking order, and then what was the most selected team by Ian Foster and the coaches. That's what we're going to go through. We've already had a look at France, who are the number 2 team. We've had a look at Ireland, who are the number 1 team, so I'll check their videos up there if you haven't seen them, because I kind of want to look at which coaches are doing consistency, picking the same guys week in, week out, and which coaches are doing rotation to try and build as much depth in terms of just like pure numbers of players. So, it's been kind of an interesting mix so far. This is the third one. Each coach is doing things slightly differently. The All Blacks 2022 record didn't start that great, man. Obviously, they beat Ireland and then lost the home series to Ireland, so 2 losses on the bounce. Loss away to South Africa. Fozzie's job was on the line. They get a win. It's all hunky-dory again. They come home, they lose to Argentina for the first ever time. So really tumultuous start to the All Blacks season. They finished things a bit better. A couple of wins over Australia, win over Japan, decent tour of Europe. But then still some really, I don't know, some question marks about some of the results. Like I said, the wins over Australia, the away win, if not for that very controversial refereeing call, doesn't go the All Blacks' way. Near capitulation against Japan. Like I said, a bit of a capitulation against England to draw that one. Had to come back from behind against Scotland. So it's certainly not been plain sailing from the All Blacks, but they did get some good wins. I mean, they beat Wales pretty comfortably. But there's not that much saying about Wales this year, to be honest, because Pivac ended up getting himself sacked. They beat the Aussies pretty comfortably in the second game. They beat Argentina pretty comfortably in the second game. Good performance in Joburg. But yeah, it's just been really mixed. I think the win rate is like 61%, which for the All Blacks is kind of not that flash. What about the players? How have the All Blacks been looking? Let's look at the front row. First, we'll put the graphs up there, and if you're looking at the number 1 jersey, that's your loose head props. It's George Bower in green and Ethan de Groot in blue. Those are your main 2 guys. Now, despite the fact that Bower's got more minutes than de Groot's stocks have certainly gone up way more than anybody else's in terms of the front rowers this year. He started way more games at the end of the year, and he is certainly the first choice guy, I think, at the moment for the All Blacks, despite the fact that, as I said, Bower's played slightly more minutes, but he is really the premier guy. I think de Groot got kind of token minutes last year, got a bit of a taste of the action, and he's really pushed his name forward, so that's him there. Both these guys slightly less than half the game time. Between the 2 of the guys, you're looking at almost 90% of the minutes, and then you've got Tu'ungafasi, Tu'unukuafe, and Aiden Ross there as well. Tu'ungafasi has played both sides of the scrum this year, so he appears both times. Remember, Tu'unukuafe, who's there in purple, if you can even see it, he has headed abroad, so his minutes are kind of down the drain in terms of just like building for a World Cup anyway. Hooker, you got Tokiaho there with around about half of the game time there in green. He's certainly pushed his way to the front of the queue to be the premier hooker in New Zealand rugby. Cody Taylor's not too far behind there in blue in terms of minutes. He is behind, but had a bit of a mixed season where he was seemingly pretty badly out of form, but the All Blacks coaching staff determinedly kept him playing, and he did seem to play himself back into a bit of form. So us fans can be a bit quick to write players off, but he did come back pretty decently well. But certainly those are the main 2 guys. Dane Cole's there in yellow, struggled a wee bit with injury. Too many calf injuries, man. He is getting on a wee bit, so calf injuries are pretty prevalent, I guess, with guys that age. Now, with hooker and with loosehead, you got to keep in mind, Asafa Aumua has certainly been on the All Blacks depth charts before. It didn't feature in 2022 for the All Blacks, and likewise Joe Moody at loosehead. These guys both, I would say, kind of key men in the All Blacks overall setup, even if they didn't get that much chance for whatever reason in 2022. Obviously, Moody's been injured, and Aumua kind of slots in and out depending on his fitness as well. But just keep those guys in mind, even if they don't appear here. And I should have actually said at the start, the All Blacks did, in terms of their depth building, play the All Blacks 15, which played some non-test games, and Māori All Blacks have played some non-test games as well. So guys who aren't going to appear on this depth chart have been getting game time at that level, just below test level. So that's another kind of depth building exercise the All Blacks or New Zealand Rugby have been going through to kind of help Fozzie with the build up to the World Cup next year. But still, nothing quite like a test match. Tight head, another guy whose stocks have risen pretty markedly is Tyrell Lomax, who's there in green. He's certainly New Zealand's premier tight head in 2022. If you told me that a year ago, I would not have believed you. Laulala is there in blue. He was our premier guy last year. Certainly, he's gotten a lot less game time this year. Fletcher Newell there in yellow has been a bit of a revelation. One of our kind of rookies who's come onto the scene pretty decently. And then Tuangafasi and Ta'avao there in purple and red, respectively. Ta'avao may find it the hardest to get back into the squad after kind of falling out with that red card against Ireland. I think was that his last game. But yeah, certainly Lomax is your main guy, and then it's a wee bit of a battle to see who is the replacement. So that's your front row. Now, the locks are absolutely as predictable as you get. Essentially, it's Barrett. That's Scott Barrett. It's Retallick and it's Whitelock. These guys get the lion's share of the game time between the three of them. If you're looking at the number 4 jersey, which is usually your tight head lock, that's Sam Whitelock there with pretty much half the game time in green, and then Brodie Retallick there in blue with almost the same, just slightly less. Brodie Retallick missed a few games with suspension and injury, remember, so I would say he would be ahead of Whitelock if not for that time missed. And then if you're looking at the 5 jersey, it's Scott Barrett there in green, who's had pretty much half the game time, and then Sam Whitelock in blue and Tupou Vaa'i in yellow. So Vaa'i is kind of the 4th choice guy who gets a little bit of token game time. I think he's had the odd start and a few 9-10 minute substitute performances. But yeah, it's largely Barrett, Whitelock, and Retallick. Between those 3 guys, that's almost all of the minutes, realistically. Patrick Tuipulotu's had a bit of game time outside the All Blacks and a little bit of token game time for the ABs, but it's nothing really much to shout about. He's one of the guys, I guess, who you could say his stocks have fallen. Loose forwards, number 6 is a bit of a mixed bag. Shannon Frizzell is there as your main guy for the 6 jersey with around about like 40% of the game time this year. That's a big improve from him from last year. I think it was last year, he had the off-the-field issues. So, yeah, he really didn't get much game time. But the selectors have been picking him. So he's up from like the 4th most chosen 6 last year to the premier guy. He's taken essentially the spot of Akira Ioane. Akira Ioane is there in blue. But certainly he's gotten less game time than last year, so it's a little bit of a disappointing one for him because he struggled to get into the All Blacks Akira, then he finally got in, and then now he's back out again. So yeah, it's just one of those ones. People criticize him for being like a bit of a flat track bully, right? Good against the little teams, but struggles when things get really physical. But certainly the 6th jersey, I don't think anyone's fully nailed it on because you got Frizzell green, Ioane blue, and then Scotty Barrett's there in yellow. So the All Blacks coaches do quite like putting him at 6 from time to time. Maybe he doesn't have the ball carrying some of the other guys. Like, he's busy, but effectiveness of his ball carries aren't that high. I mean, he's a big guy. Locks generally don't carry as well as some of the guys who are a bit closer to the ground. But yeah, they like certainly the extra line-out option. And then yeah, you've got a few token minutes for your other guys, but it's mainly those 3 guys with, as I said, Frizzell. His stocks have gone up this year. Sam came back from a long-term injury last year to reclaim the number 7 jersey as pretty much his own from Dalton Papali'i. Dalton Papali'i is in blue. Remember when Kane got injured towards the end of the season, Dalton got some good back-to-back game time. But those are pretty much your 2 guys at 7 with a little bit of Ardie Savea from time to time there in yellow. Really unsurprising, you got our 2 kind of premier open sides. And then Savea, who used to be an open side, who's now to number 8. And then number 8 is Savea. And the All Blacks have used him way more at number 8 than last year, pretty much. Like, not quite double, but almost double the amount of like game time he got at number 8 last year. He's really played a lot of number 8 at the expense of Hoskins Tutu, who's there in blue. So it's pretty much the Savea show, and he's been in world-class form, so you can't really blame the All Blacks coaches. And then you got a few guys. Akira Ioane's had to shift every now and again. Peter Gus Sowakula is one guy they tried ever so briefly. He seems to have fallen out of favour. And then Dalton Papali'i, I think, had this weird thing with that game against Ireland where the All Blacks had a red card. They ended up substituting Savea. He couldn't come back on. Remember there was that debacle about whether the referees got that right. Dalton was like packing down at 8 and then switching to 6. It was a bit weird one, so I just chucked him down. But again, it's token minutes really. He's not realistically one of the guys who is a regular number 8. It's pretty much the Savea, Sotutu, and maybe Ioane show. But looking at that game time, you're looking at 3/4 Savea. So if he's fit, he is absolutely playing number 8. More than any other forward, Savea has absolutely dominated the minutes. Like any other guy who's had half the game time is looking at around like 50%, like Sam Cane, Scott Barrett, Sam Whitelock, like all these guys around half the game time, but then Savia, 3/4, massively important for the All Blacks. Into the backs, another guy who's gotten a lot more game time is Aaron Smith. He's had a pretty bloody good year, I think. Certainly a lot more minutes than last year. He actually had less minutes than TJ last year, and TJ is one who's just fallen off a cliff in terms of All Blacks selection. Did get back into the squad towards the end of the year, but Smith there with almost like 70% of the game time. Remembering last year he took a bit of time off because his missus was having a baby, so that kind of affected his overall game time. And then Finlay Christie's been the second choice guy there in blue. I wouldn't say Christie's absolutely nailed on that position though, because remember, like I said, TJ came back in, he's there in yellow. He was our number one guy last year. He's really, I mean, he got some, as I said, non-All Blacks game time with the All Blacks 15 and whatnot, and Māori All Blacks, but yeah, in terms of All Blacks selection, his days looked done. He did get back into the squad at the end, and then you have Falau Fakatava there in purple, who did have a bit of game time, but then got injured, and Brad Weber, sadly, man, like just there, one token bench game. Another guy who's gone down from like getting almost a quarter of the game time last year to virtually nothing. So yeah, number 9 is pretty much the Aaron Smith show. And then the same is true with 10, except it's Mo'unga. Mo'unga's taken the number 1 spot from Bodie. Bodie was our number 1 10 last year in terms of game time, so they've swapped spots. So it's Mo'unga and Bodie. Pretty much simple as that. A guy like D-Mac didn't get any game time this year, either at fullback or at 10, so he is obviously another one of our options, but the All Blacks seem to be pretty happy with either Mo'unga or Bowden to lead the side from 10. I should have mentioned for loose forwards, a couple of guys, Blackadder and Jacobson are other guys who don't appear here, who did get some game time last year before I forget. But anyway, that's your 9-10. Midfield, it's a bit of a discrepancy. It's a difference between 12 and 13. 12 is really mixed, 13 is really stable. If you start with 13, it's the Rieko Ioane show. He's had, I think, more minutes in any one position than any other player for the All Blacks this year. Like almost 80% of the game time, it's been Rieko at 13. And to be honest, he's been pretty good, man. Look at his tackling stats; they're great. Look at his attacking stats; they're great. He's been very, very busy. He's just got gas to burn, eh? It's the kind of thing you can't buy. I mean, Enoa, ALB, Quintupaya, these guys have all had kind of a little bit of game time, but for the most part, it's all Rieko. Whereas 12 is a proper mixed bag. David Havili is our main 12, and that's the same as last year, so very, very similar. But then Geordie Barrett has been pretty immense when he's been given a crack at 12. He's there in blue. I reckon he's going to be hunting Havili's job down for next year if the All Blacks are able to give him a chance. Tupaya is there in yellow. Remember, he's out with a pretty long-term injury, so that's not done his World Cup chances any favours. And then Roger Tuivasa-Sheck there in purple did get a start against Japan and got a couple of other games, but yeah, didn't exactly waltz into the 12 jersey and make it its own. He's still adapting to rugby union after they switched from league. So the battle between Havili and Geordie, my money is going to be on Geordie, but it depends if the All Blacks want to keep playing Geordie at fullback or not, I suppose. Remembering Goodhue has just had another ALB and Goodhue. ALB at least got back into the side in terms of getting himself fit, but Goodhue's just been out for what seems like bloody forever. Outside backs, looking at the left wing, man, Caleb Clark has come back and absolutely bossed things. I mean, remember, he took some time off to go to the Olympics, kind of fell out of favour, but then George Bridge just, yeah, he's gone on to the other side of the bridge. He's over in France now. So he was the number 1 left winger for the All Blacks last year. He's out the picture, and now it's Caleb Clark, 3/4 of the game time. They did experiment a little bit early on with Lester Fainganuku, but then I remember he's there in blue. He took some time off for like some family reasons and never got back into the side. So Lester's there in blue, Severis there in yellow. I think Geordie and Rieko, like token performance is not really that much worth mentioning. In terms of starts, it's pretty much Caleb Clark. I know he gets a little bit of criticism for some of his defensive and positioning play, but he's a big unit going forward. And then right wing, a little bit more mixed. Will Jordan, same as last year. He's our premier guy on the right wing. Severis is the second guy. I think that's the same as last year. And then Mark Talea, quite happily, there in yellow, did get a couple of games towards the end of the year and didn't look out of place. So the right wing, I still think, is Will Jordan's, but at least there's a couple of other contenders in the mix. Severis, maybe his stocks seem to be on the way down, but it's kind of hard to say because he does float a little bit between both wings. So yeah, we'll see. Fullback, it's the Geordie Barrett show and the Bodie Barrett show. So Geordie's there in green over half the game time, and then Bodie's there in blue. So when Bodie's not been playing 10, he's been playing 15, and then I don't think he played much 15 last year. From memory of last year's depth chart, they pretty much kept Bodie as a 10, but this year it's back to 15. No DMAC on display. They did give Perofeta a little bit of game time as well. Remember, we got that game against Japan, and then like a minute here and there. He's there in yellow. So if Geordie switches to 12, that does make the fullback conversation kind of interesting, because you have got Perofeta, like I mentioned. You have got Will Jordan, if they want to play a Talia. Will Jordan, who could switch to fullback where he plays a lot of his club rugby. So yeah, we'll kind of have to see. But essentially, that's how things are looking. Certainly, it's a bit different from Ireland, especially. It's more similar to France, but it's still more rotation than France. Like, if you were looking at the All Blacks, of the guys who start, they've had like 57% by my count of the game time. So just under 60% of the game time. Whereas the French, the starting guys get a little bit more game time. The bench guys get a little bit less. So it's a little bit more towards that kind of consistency thing. The French guys are at like 60%, so marginally higher. And then you look at the Irish, they're at like 67. So the Irish are very much more down the road of the starting 15 guys start more often and they get more minutes than the bench guys. So again, like, you build more cohesion that way, but you just are putting more eggs in one basket in case of injury. So I think the number of players used is pretty similar. I think the All Blacks used like 44, the French used 45, the Irish used 45. So not like drastically different in terms of the number of players. It's just how much time the kind of fringe guys are able to get. The most selected All Blacks 15 this year, if you're just looking at like which guys got the most minutes, that'd be Bauer, Taukei'aho, and Lomax. I do think, though, on recent form, you replaced Bauer with De Groot, but as I said, Bauer got more minutes this year. Whitelock and Barrett in the second row, although, as I said, I do think it'd be probably Whitelock and Retallick if Retallick had played a little bit more this season, but maybe Barrett as well. But as I said, Barrett's been playing a bit of 6. Frizzell, Kane, and Savia is the back row. I think that's pretty much the All Blacks' first choice back row at the moment. Smith and Moonga, I think that is the All Blacks' first choice 9-10. Havili and Ioane, well, like I said, there's still a bit of a question mark about where Geordie Barrett plays, but in 2022 it's Havili and Ioane, and then back row, Clark on the left, Jordan on the right, and then Geordie Barrett at fullback. So yeah, it's a pretty decent looking team. Is it a team that's going to win a World Cup? Yeah, we'll kind of have to wait and see as to how things go next year. But anyway, that's the All Blacks depth chart for 2022, folks. You guys let us know your thoughts. How do you think the All Blacks are looking for their depth going into next year? Like I mentioned, a bunch of guys like Jacobson and DMAC and other guys are just escaping my brain right now. Moody didn't get to play, but at least for test level, but they're still certainly in the mix. Almua as well. But anyway, you guys let us know your thoughts, and yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.